Childhood, we all have it, and it's in our childhoods that we see and experience things in media that stick with us, consciously or even subconsciously. For me, something stuck in my mind back then, a particular piece of media passed from the British Broadcasting Corporation, otherwise known as the BBC, a copyright warning, a wavy map, morphing into a spinning golden globe and a melody that conducted itself in the back of my brain for many years. This was the Morphing COW Globe, a childhood fear of mine, and many others too, and yet at the same time, intriguing. As part of the general branding and the BBC's penchant to keep themselves updated in the world of television and media, the Morphing COW Globe became, for a few years, the face of the BBC. But as history went on, people would become fascinated with it. Little do people know that the Morphing COW Globe would return to the public eye in a way people didn't expect, unintentionally because of my actions. Today on CRT Dreams, we'll be diving into the curious case of the Morphing COW Globe, how people saw it from their childhoods and how it attracted the attention of a large community, and how it gained an interesting legacy. Without further ado, let's go. So, what exactly is this thing? See, out of all the things I've covered on CRT Dreams, it's usually an obscure mystery or some sort of obscure event. The Morphing COW Globe is a weird exception. It's known to a select range of people, and what is essentially one of the oldest, oddest, and most veiled communities online. One that has probably been around in theory before the birth of the internet itself. I'll talk a bit more about that soon. It falls into a strange crevice between obscure and known. It only makes the Morphing COW Globe weirder. To many a child growing up, from when it was first seen to when I first saw it myself in my childhood, it pretty much haunted us all. That strange melody, a globe surrounded by the darkness of space. At least in our imaginations. I'm not sure why it spooked me and others, but it certainly did, and it's not the first indent/logo to have such an effect. One of the most famous cases of this is the red S from Hell, which apparently looked spooky enough, spooks children enough, that it has infamy and it's still somewhat infamous. That brings me to my next point, the logo/indent community. This is something that, if you think forwardly, you may have actually encountered by complete chance before. Saw an upload of an old logo/indent you saw on some old crusty VHS tape or DVD from eons ago. Saw it being a source of remixing, like those old Sparta remixes that used to inhabit YouTube a lot, maybe even a YTP, then you've probably unknowingly come across them. They're a community that has existed potentially since the advent of logos itself, at least television ones. But they seem to have come into prominence, at least the obscure kind here, in the advent of the internet age. I had always been aware of these folks, and the level of dedication to the craft and the appreciation of this sort of stuff, logo and indents, even just the documentation of when they aired, what tapes they were on, so on and so forth. I can't deny that it's honestly impressive. It seems that since the advent of YouTube, the community had come into wider existence. You can basically go on any upload of a logo or indent and you can see people reminiscing about their childhood or enjoying it. It's a widespread community and at the same time, disparate, disconnected. If you would honestly like to learn more about the logo community and I guess the interest around it, I highly recommend looking at a video called Why Are People So Obsessed with TV Logos by a YouTuber known as Daniel T Gaming. It's honestly a really informative video that I highly recommend if you're interested in this sort of thing. Give it a watch, it's pretty good. But what does this have to do with the Morphing COW Globe? You see, it was thanks to the dedication of those people, those kind of people, that more details were ultimately understood about it, but it would eventually lead to the somewhat public reappearance of this old piece of media in a way others could have never really expected. But let's dive into the globe itself. The Morphing COW Globe isn't actually the name of it. Believe it or not, this is a name that was adopted out of what I presume was a YouTube upload of it, and this globe is not the only one in existence as well. The Morphing COW Globe that me and many others were haunted by when we were younger, mesmerised even, seems to be a variant of the real one that aired on, well, British television, the airwaves back then. The one that we were haunted by seems to be a variant that was on tapes and BBC videotape releases. But that begs the question, how did the computer-originated world come to be in the first place? Let's delve into that. Ever since the inception of them, the BBC branded themselves with visuals like any corporation would. For them, however, they always had the aim of keeping themselves relevant and using their technology to emphasise that, as well as to modernise themselves in the public sphere. So the interest in advancing their look to the masses had begun to crop up in the 70s approximately. Before this, the use of the globe as their symbol on the airwaves and to the masses had already been in place. The globe would be shown and produced to the masses from the 60s to the mid-80s via a camera that the BBC employed called the Nexus Orthicon display device, otherwise known as the Noddy. The camera served its purpose quite well for how long it lasted, although with the forward mindset of the company, they had apparently already been trying to figure out how to modernise themselves even further. After all, technology was advancing. This was an age of technological evolution. According to the BBC themselves, work into replacing the old globe and the Noddy had begun in 1974, with a focus on creating a, quote, computerised network symbol, end quote. The focus was evident from the get-go. The BBC wanted to go beyond the technical nature, the mechanical nature of their previous identification work, and it would be in a document titled, quote, New Symbols for Network and Regional Use, end quote, that would begin the process of changing things in the realm of the BBC. Submitted by a man named Rex Morfoot, there were apparently 3 principal ideas suggested in the document. Unfortunately, this document doesn't seem to be public, but it seems that these ideas would not ultimately be the basis of the new venture, the new looking into of modernising themselves. Progress had been slow from here, and eventually the controllers of the 2 major BBC channels at the time, BBC One and BBC Two, would be called in to discuss the matter, although these only resulted in minor modifications to the idea, ultimately. By 1979, because of the discussions, it was planned for BBC Two to go fully electronic, to fit with the times, but with the remaining popularity of the old-fashioned globe from viewers, this idea was ultimately rescinded. Details from here are primarily hazy, but from what I was able to piece together, the corporation was still interested in moving the BBC to an increasingly technological age, and the 80s would roll in. On the other side of BBC operations, however, BBC Video would be formed. This was a division of BBC Enterprises that would handle video releases of BBC material, having a mostly worldwide distribution. Remember this for later. Regardless, they were formed. And with technology becoming more and more advanced, the BBC would turn their attention to a man that they had employed before, known as Oliver Elms. To fans of Doctor Who, you might know this guy, as he produced some of the most iconic opening visuals for the last few years of the classic Doctor Who series, specifically the 7th Doctor. But it seems that during the undocumented years of this new project's development, the BBC assigned the man responsible for a lot of BBC visuals, famous to many, for the project. The fruits of such efforts had begun to crop up around 1982 as the BBC would show a peek into the evolving landscape and technology on their front on a programme known as Tomorrow's World. This stuff shown is absolutely fascinating, and it's a really classic insight into the technology of back in the day. Just take a look.
But the magic comes when the picture from that camera is fed into this device with its control box. So, instantly, I can get a round world, or if I happen to want to, I could have a cylindrical world, or better still, a randomly turning square world. So with this device, you can instantly try out different ideas.
By 1983, development of the new project was in full force, and with the collaborative effort between Oliver Elms, BBC Computer Graphics, Graphic Design, and the design departments, they would all band together to handle the task of creating the globe. By 1984, development of the new visual for the BBC would continue, even as the company shifted and changed behind the scenes. During the same year, a man named Michael Grade would take over control as controller of BBC One. The decision, in tandem with the development of the new visual, was merely a part of a larger scope of things. During this time, the BBC had been suffering under the heavy pressure of competition in ratings. Not wanting to allow things to slip even further, Grade would push the development of the Globe, the new visual, back a year to 1985 to coincide with the relaunching of the programme schedule that would hope to get the ratings back up, and the efforts of Oliver Elms and the other sections of the BBC and Grade's patience would pay off, as on the 18th of February 1985, the Globe, known as the Computer-Originated World, also known as the COW Globe, would debut. Information on if it did well, ratings-wise, is scarce, but judging by the BBC's continued existence, it can be presumed that it did help, that everything did pay off. The computer-originated World Globe would be used for years to come, with its final mainline appearance being on the 15th of February 1991. It would be used in modified forms elsewhere until the mid-90s, when it was truly discontinued. One thing that sticks out, however, in all of this is that the Globe itself, the one that aired on the airwaves, isn't the same Morphing COW Globe that stuck itself in the minds of people, children, myself, back then. Correct, it's not the same version, but it's instead the origin of its usage. The COW Globe will be used by the BBC video division of the corporation from 1988 to 1991. It is in this use of the Globe that the music that haunted the minds of many for many years would come to be used, and as the official uses of the COW on the airwaves lacked it. Compared to the official uses on the airwaves, this version is odd. For one, it's seemingly unknown if those who worked on the airwave version of the Globe had actually been behind the auditory cue that comes with this version. A notable aspect related to that is that audio cue seems to sample from a track that was used on a film called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The sound itself created by a man named Isao Tomita. Compare them both. It's unknown if Tomita was aware of this sampling or if he allowed it. Either way, the lack of info around this version of the Globe is intriguing. Regardless, the COW served its purpose for what it was and stuck in the minds of viewers and children for years. And with that, that's the mainline history of the Morphing COW Globe, the computer-originated world that has haunted the minds of people like me, the local community, and even children for years. Although it's interesting that what has stuck in our minds was in fact an offshoot of the original, there's something honestly kind of impressive and interesting about the minute little details like the cow in something as large as the BBC. In today's age, iconography and presentation, everything like this is important, especially in the online world, and in the television world, which has admittedly been on a slow decline ever since the internet has been consuming its role. I just think that something like this should be remembered. There was once an age in which corporations like the BBC really had to show their prowess to the masses and get ratings up in a bitter battle for viewership. It's still somewhat the same now, although less so. I overall think that the idea of presentation and its importance really hasn't changed since the days of the COW Globe. Hell, look at CRT Dreams, look at the show that you're watching now. I put a lot of effort into the design work of it. The viewing space you're watching now, my little Kato, the logos, the break/bumpers, and the ending sequence. It takes a lot of time and effort, and it's well worth it, so I can really understand the time and effort that people really had to put in order to make something like the Morphing COW Globe, the computer-originated world, successful and workable. In another example, my two best friends who run Katanuki, a channel you should check out if you love my stuff by the way, they put a lot of time and effort into their visual presentation and crafting of their work too. The need and demand for effort in these ventures really hasn't changed since the days of the COW, and I really like that personally. On the other hand, the COW is seen as a technical curiosity, and at the time of its original heyday, it was seen as a technological marvel. Not as big as, say, Toy Story, which would happen a decade later, but you get the picture. Looking into its creation, the COW I mean, there was a lot that was required just to get this thing working. And a look into the little box that housed the technology of the COW Globe, the computer-originated world, reveals so much about it. Technology has honestly evolved since the time of the COW Globe, but looking back on it and seeing that there is a lot of dedication and love towards this sort of stuff, it is legitimately comforting. It's honestly comforting, and looking up the COW on Google and YouTube, just on the internet in general, you can see re-upload after re-upload of the COW, its variants, recreations in 4K, etc, etc, and the logo community has certainly had fun with it too. I genuinely think it's heartwarming to see this level of enthusiasm and love towards something like this, despite how niche it is. I guess there's one thing that always did gnaw at the back of my mind, however, when it comes to this globe now. Why did so many of us find it scary? Why did I cover my face as a child away from this honestly harmless little piece of curious and interesting media? Well, I can somewhat give an explanation for it, but I don't know, this is more personal perspective really, so take it with a grain of salt. The mind of a child is a lot different from that of an adult. It depends from person to person, of course, but sitting in the dark and looking at a CRT playing an episode of something as cute and simple like Pingu, then it fade into black and seeing a globe surrounded by a complete black void, the complete darkness of space, plus that auditory jingle that seems to feel alien and fittingly so because where it's sampled from, it had no doubt in impacting and imprinting itself on the mind of a child like me still growing up. And others too. I've seen comments describing this whole thing as creepy, and to an extent I can understand why. Explaining childhood fear is always going to be difficult. It's a very introspective and personal kind of thing, but I hope that this can be a reasonable enough explanation in this sense. One last thing I would like to note is, well, if the impact of the BBC's creation was understood by them. Judging by the amount of official articles on the Globe, by the BBC and the level of documentation throughout the internet and local community, I would like to presume and speculate that they are aware of the impact of their creation. But what about Oliver Elms, the man directly behind this whole thing? Is he aware of the impact his creation had? Well, that's hard to tell. It's highly possible he was aware, although asking him is not possible anymore. Unfortunately, Oliver Elms passed away on the 4th of May 2011, a decade ago. Nevertheless, his work lives on, and his work has certainly been appreciated even beyond its natural date of redundancy. Well, with all this said and done, this doesn't conclude the history of the globe. You probably expected me to say that everything was over, right? Not exactly. The computer-originated world, the Morphing COW Globe, would head back into the limelight of appreciation in a way that wasn't anticipated by me on accident. What I say is true, although there is a lot more to it than what I just said. What do I mean exactly? See, back when I was in my late teens, I rediscovered the Morphing COW Globe, the computer-originated world, from my childhood. As a result, I would find a clip of it online on YouTube, and being into the vaporwave scene back then, heavily so, I am a massive fan of vaporwave. I posted the clip of the globe to r/vaporwave, which is a pretty active vaporwave community on Reddit. On the 5th of September 2016, I haphazardly posted that clip to that subreddit, and I went to bed. It had been a pretty tiring day, and I needed to rest for the next. However, when I woke up, the post had exploded overnight. By a complete haphazard posting, I didn't even expect a single comment. I had ended up with a post that, at the time, had been massively active on that subreddit, and it had a bustling comments section. I had introduced a collective of nostalgia enthusiasts to a piece of media past. People were interested. People were bemused by the Britishness of it. And what was especially cool was that 4 people had turned this short little clip into full-blown vaporwave tracks. The respective 4 people were Ultra Klystron, Chappie Wagon, Yummy VHS, and Imdo Celatronic. Unfortunately, Yummy VHS has since deleted their track, but for the others, they took the globe and created something entirely new, and without even realising it at the time, I had given a bunch of musicians a new piece, a new sound to play with, and they had created something amazing with it. My actions had led to musicians creating more music with this clip. With the Morphing COW Globe, I would be introduced to these musicians, and I would especially connect with Ultra Klystron, becoming a pretty massive fan of his works. Since this time, however, the Morphing COW Globe that was featured in these releases is remained primarily in the download like it previously was, although to see that it became loved by a new generation of nostalgia enthusiasts and continues to be loved by the old generation of the logo community, myself, and children from back then, is genuinely heartwarming. A piece of media from the BBC, the desire to modernise, and the impact it had on the masses, and children, and people like me. It's not often that media like this truly outlives its era, but when it does, big impacts always tend to happen. What may seem strange to outsiders may in fact be impressive in truth. From being a childhood fear to being music to my ears, the COW Globe, the Morphing COW Globe, lives on, a piece of media forever in flux, surviving as an icon of a nostalgic age.